The ship landed on Nethvora just as the twin suns began to set. Jake Morrison stepped off the cargo ramp and took his first breath of alien air. It smelled like rust and something bitter he could not name. The sky was orange and purple, and the ground beneath his boots was gray stone that stretched in every direction. A Kolvani official waited for him near the landing pad. The creature stood on 4 legs and had a face that reminded Jake of a lizard mixed with something older. Its scales were dark green, and its yellow eyes watched Jake with a look that seemed nervous. "You are the human engineer," the Kolvani said. Its voice came through a small translator device on its chest. "I am Supervisor Roth. Welcome to Nethvora." Jake nodded and adjusted the heavy bag on his shoulder. "You said you had a job." "Triple pay. What's the catch?" Roth made a clicking sound that might have been a laugh or might have been fear. "Direct. I have heard humans are direct. Come, we will talk in my office." They walked through the mining colony. It was a collection of metal buildings and machinery spread across the rocky landscape. Jake noticed that the workers moved quickly and kept their heads down. No one looked toward the mountains in the distance. No one looked toward the large elevator shaft at the edge of the colony. Roth's office was small and cold. The supervisor sat behind a desk covered in screens and datapads. Jake remained standing. "Mine shaft 77, Roth said. It was our most productive site. Rich with Velthian crystals. Very valuable. Very rare, was? Jake asked. "We closed it 8 months ago. There was an incident." Jake waited. He had learned that silence made people talk more than questions did. Roth's scales shifted color slightly, turning a shade darker. "Something lives in the deep tunnels. Something that was there before we began mining. When we broke through to the lower chambers, we woke them." "Them?" "The miners called them dragons. 4 of them. They killed 37 workers in one night. We sealed the mine and never went back." Jake thought about this. "And you want me to go down there? We need someone to retrieve the crystals we left behind. There are millions worth of credits sitting in that mine. The company has sent others before. Korvani soldiers. Talaxian hunters. A team from the Vaughn Collective." Roth paused. None of them returned. "Then why would I?" Roth leaned forward. "Because humans are different. Your species comes from a death world. You survive things that kill others. And you," the supervisor studied Jake's face, "you do not look afraid." Jake almost smiled. "Fear is expensive. I stopped paying for it a long time ago." They discussed the terms. Triple pay. Full medical coverage. A ship waiting to take him off-world the moment he returned with the crystals. Jake signed the contract on a datapad and asked for maps of the mine. That evening, he sat in the colony's small bar and studied the tunnel layouts. The mine went deep into the planet, more than 2 kilometers down. The crystal deposits were in the lowest chamber. The dragons had been seen in the tunnels between the elevator and the crystals. "You are the human." Jake looked up. A woman stood next to his table. She was human, with short brown hair and tired eyes. She wore a research uniform with the symbol of the Galactic Science Corps. "I'm Dr. Lisa Grant," she said. "Xenobiologist. I study the native species on this planet." She sat down without asking permission. "And I'm here to tell you not to go into that mine. Everyone keeps telling me that, because it's good advice." Lisa pulled out a small device and projected an image above the table. It showed a dark shape with a long body, 4 powerful legs, and a head covered in what looked like armor. "This is the best image we have of the creatures. The Kolvani call them dragons, but they're actually called Varth. They're apex predators. They lived in the deep caves for thousands of years before the miners broke through. Jake studied the image. They look big. 3 meters tall, 5 meters long. They have no eyes because they evolved in complete darkness. They sense vibrations and heat. But that's not the worst part. Lisa leaned closer. They feed on fear. What does that mean? Their prey produces certain chemicals when it's afraid. The Varth have evolved to detect and consume those chemicals. They don't just kill for food. They hunt because they enjoy making their prey terrified before they die. Jake saved the image to his own device. Good to know. Lisa stared at him. You're still going. I have debts. Bad ones. The kind that follow you across star systems. Jake finished his drink. This job clears all of them. Lisa shook her head, but did not argue further. She left her contact information and walked away. Jake spent the rest of the night preparing his equipment, lights, oxygen tanks, a mining pick that could cut through stone, a small pistol that probably would not stop something 3 meters tall, but made him feel slightly better. The next morning, he walked to the elevator shaft. A small crowd had gathered to watch. Supervisor Vroth was there, along with several Kurvani workers. Lisa stood at the back, her arms crossed. An old Kurvani miner pushed through the crowd and grabbed Jake's arm. The creature was missing one eye, and its scales were faded with age. I am Talos, the old miner said. I was there the night they came. I am the only one who escaped. Jake waited. The dragons do not hunt for food, Talos said. They hunt because they enjoy fear. They will not kill you quickly. They will wait. They will watch. They will try to break you first. And when you finally scream, when you finally beg, they will take their time. Jake gently removed the old miner's hand from his arm. Thank you for the warning. He stepped into the elevator cage. The metal door closed with a heavy clang. Vroth pressed a button, and the machinery began to move. Jake descended into the darkness of Mine Shaft 77. The light from the surface grew smaller and smaller above him until it was just a tiny dot. Then it was gone completely. The elevator shook and groaned as it went deeper. Jake checked his headlamp and made sure his equipment was secure. The temperature dropped. The air grew thick and stale. After several minutes, the elevator stopped with a loud crash. Jake opened the cage door and stepped out into the tunnel. His headlamp cut through the darkness, revealing stone walls covered in strange markings. Mining equipment lay scattered on the ground. Helmets, tools, personal belongings, left behind by workers who never came back. Jake took a deep breath and began to walk. Somewhere in the darkness ahead, something moved. The hunt had begun. The tunnel stretched ahead of Jake like a throat that wanted to swallow him. His headlamp showed only a small circle of light in the endless darkness. Every step he took echoed off the stone walls and traveled deep into the mine. He walked slowly and carefully. The ground was uneven, covered with loose rocks and abandoned equipment. Emergency lights flickered along the ceiling, casting weak orange glows that did nothing to push back the shadows. Jake found the first body. After 10 minutes of walking it was a Kurvani miner, still wearing its helmet and work suit. The body was pressed against the tunnel wall, frozen in a position of pure terror. Its mouth was open in a silent scream. Its claws had scratched deep marks into the stone as if it had tried to dig through solid rock to escape. Jake crouched beside the body and examined it. There were no wounds, no blood, no signs of physical attack. The miner had simply died of fear. He stood up and continued walking. More bodies appeared as he went deeper. Kurvani workers in groups of 2 or 3, all of them showing the same expression of absolute horror. Then he found the soldiers. 4 of them, heavily armed, their weapons still in their hands. They had died back to back, facing the darkness in every direction. Jake checked their equipment. The weapons were fully loaded. They had never fired a single shot. Whatever killed them had been too fast, or too terrifying to fight. The tunnel split into 3 paths ahead. Jake checked his map and chose the center route, the one that led to the crystal chamber. He had walked another 100 meters when he heard it. A sound, low and deep, like stone grinding against stone somewhere in the darkness behind him. Jake stopped and turned off his headlamp. The darkness closed around him like a fist. He stood completely still, controlling his breathing, listening. The grinding sound came again, closer this time. Then footsteps, heavy, slow, patient. Something was following him. Jake turned his lamp back on and pointed it down the tunnel. The light reached about 20 meters before the darkness swallowed it. At the very edge of the light, he saw something move, a shape. Massive, black scales that seemed to drink in the light rather than reflect it. 4 powerful legs. A head covered in armor like plates. No eyes. The Varus stood at the edge of the light and did not move. Its head tilted slightly, as if it was studying Jake without seeing him. Jake felt his heart beat faster. He forced it to slow down. He had been in worse situations. Trapped in a flooding submarine, pinned under rubble after an earthquake, lost in a cave system with no light and no oxygen for 6 hours. Fear was familiar. Fear was an old friend that visited often. Jake had learned long ago not to let it control him. The dragon made a low rumbling sound. It took 1 step forward into the light, revealing more of its body. It was exactly as Lisa had described. 3 meters tall, 5 meters long, built for killing. But it did not attack. It stood there, head moving slowly from side to side, sensing the air. Jake realized it was waiting, testing, looking for the fear chemicals that its prey always produced. Jake exhaled slowly. "Sorry to disappoint you," he said quietly. The dragon's head snapped toward him at the sound of his voice. It made another grinding noise, deeper this time, almost angry. Then it turned and walked back into the darkness. Its footsteps faded until there was only silence. Jake waited a full minute before he continued walking. The tunnels grew narrower as he went deeper. The walls pressed closer. The ceiling hung lower. Jake had to duck under fallen support beams and climb over piles of collapsed rock. He found more bodies. A team of Thalaxian hunters, their 4 arms still holding energy rifles. A pair from the Vorn Collective, their encounter suits torn open. All dead with the same expression of overwhelming terror. The dragons had killed every single one of them. Not with claws or teeth, but with fear itself. Jake reached a large chamber where the tunnel widened into an open space. Old mining equipment sat rusted and silent. Carts filled with unprocessed ore. Drilling machines covered in dust. He saw movement in 3 different directions at once. 3 more dragons emerged from side tunnels, surrounding him. They were slightly smaller than the first one, but no less dangerous. Their eyeless heads turned toward Jake as they formed a triangle around him. The 4th dragon, the largest one, appeared from the tunnel behind him. It blocked his only way back to the elevator. Jake was trapped. The 4 Vorith circled slowly, their claws clicking on the stone floor. They made sounds to each other, low frequencies that Jake could feel vibrating in his chest. They were communicating, planning. Jake stood in the center of the chamber and waited. One of the smaller dragons opened its mouth and produced a sound that made Jake's blood run cold. It was a scream. A Kovani scream, perfect in every detail. The dragon had recorded its victim's final moment and was playing it back. Another dragon made a different sound. Human words, broken and desperate. "Please, please, no, please." The voice of someone who had come before Jake, someone who had begged. The dragons were trying to scare him. using the memories of their kills to break him down. Jake closed his eyes and breathed. He thought about his mother's voice. He thought about the ocean on Earth, the way it looked at sunset. He thought about every terrible thing he had survived and how he was still standing. When he opened his eyes, his heart rate had not changed. The largest dragon made a sound that might have been confusion. It stepped closer, its armored head just 2 meters from Jake's face. It inhaled deeply, searching for the chemicals it needed. It found nothing. Jake met the dragon's eyeless gaze. "I'm not afraid of you," he said. "I've seen worse than you. I've survived worse than you. If you're going to kill me, then do it. But I won't give you what you want." The dragon pulled back. It made a sound to the others, and they responded. They seemed agitated, unsure. Jake turned his back on the largest dragon and began walking toward the tunnel that led to the crystal chamber. It was a risk, a massive risk. But Jake understood predators. They respected strength. The dragons did not attack. They followed him instead, staying in the shadows just beyond his light, watching, waiting to see what this strange creature would do next. Jake smiled to himself and kept walking into the darkness. He was not afraid, and that made him the most dangerous thing in the mine. The crystal chamber was beautiful. Even Jake, who had seen many strange things across the galaxy, stopped and stared when he entered. Thousands of Velthian crystals grew from the walls and ceiling like frozen light. They glowed with a soft blue color that filled the chamber with an alien beauty. The crystals were worth millions, enough to pay his debts 10 times over, enough to buy a ship and disappear to the far edges of known space. But Jake was not alone. The 4 dragons followed him into the chamber. They spread out along the walls, their dark bodies a sharp contrast to the glowing crystals. Their eyeless heads tracked his every movement. Jake walked to the center of the chamber and set down his bag. He looked around at the crystals, then at the dragons, then back at the crystals. "Beautiful place," he said to no one in particular. "I can see why you don't want anyone taking these." The largest dragon moved closer. It was testing him again, looking for any sign of weakness. Jake ignored it and sat down on a flat rock. He reached into his bag and pulled out a ration bar. He unwrapped it slowly, took a bite, and chewed while the 4 most dangerous predators on the planet watched him. The dragons did not know what to make of this behavior. Their prey did not sit and eat in front of them. Their prey ran or fought or begged. Their prey was always afraid. This human was none of those things. One of the smaller dragons grew impatient. It charged at Jake with its mouth open, claws ready to tear him apart. Jake rolled to the side and grabbed his mining pick. As the dragon passed, he swung the heavy tool and struck its leg. The dragon screamed. Not a recorded scream from a victim, but its own voice, filled with pain and surprise. Dark blood sprayed across the crystal floor. The creature stumbled and crashed into the wall. Jake stood with his pick ready, facing the other 3 dragons. "Anyone else want to try?" The dragons did not move. They stared at their wounded companion, then at Jake, then at each other. They made low sounds that vibrated through the chamber. The wounded dragon pulled itself up and limped back to the others. It was not badly hurt, but it was angry and confused. The largest dragon stepped forward. Jake raised his pick, ready to fight. But the dragon did not attack. It walked in a slow circle around Jake, studying him from every angle. Then it sat down. The other dragons followed. One by one, they lowered themselves to the ground and became still. They formed a ring around Jake, watching him with their eyeless faces. Jake kept his pick ready for a long time. Minutes passed. Nothing happened. The dragon simply sat and waited. His communicator crackled with static. Then Lisa's voice broke through. "Jake? Jake, can you hear me?" He touched the device on his collar. I'm here. I found the crystal chamber. Are you hurt? My sensors show 4 large life forms around you. The dragons. Yeah, we've met. Jake looked at the creatures surrounding him. They're not attacking. They're just sitting here. There was a pause. That doesn't make sense. The Varth are aggressive predators. They should have killed you by now. They tried. One of them charged me. I hit it with my pick. After that, they just stopped. More silence. Jake could hear Lisa typing rapidly on her equipment. Jake, I've been researching the Varth species. There's something in the old records from before the mining operation started. The original surveys. What did you find? The Varth have complex social behavior. They live in family groups. And they have a bonding ritual. Lisa's voice grew excited. When a Varth encounters a creature that doesn't show fear, that resists them completely, they don't see it as prey anymore. They see it as an equal. Jake looked at the largest dragon. Hux. It was still watching him, its head tilted at that curious angle. An equal? Maybe more than that. The records mention that Varth have adopted members of other species into their family groups. Creatures that prove themselves strong enough to resist the fear. The largest dragon made a sound, low and rumbling. Jake felt it in his bones. Jake, I think you've done something no one else has ever done. You didn't just survive them. You impressed them. Jake lowered his pick slowly. He took a step toward the largest dragon. The creature did not move. It did not growl or threaten. It simply waited. Jake stopped directly in front of the dragon, close enough to touch. He could see the details of its armored head, the small holes where ears might be, the heavy plates that protected its skull. You've been alone down here for a long time, Jake said quietly, defending your home, killing anyone who came to take it. You're not monsters. You're survivors. The dragon made another sound, softer this time, almost gentle. I came here to take your crystals, Jake continued, to steal from you like everyone else. But I'm starting to think those crystals are why I'm really here. He reached out his hand slowly. The dragon did not pull back. Jake touched the armor plate above its nose. The scales were warm, almost hot. He could feel the creature's heartbeat, slow and powerful. The dragon exhaled. A warm breath that washed over Jake like a wave dot. Then it spoke, not with words, but with a sound that Jake's translator picked up and converted. A single concept. A single idea. Stay. Jake pulled his hand back. He looked at the other 3 dragons, all watching him with what might have been hope. They had been alone in the darkness for so long, fighting, killing, surviving. Without rest, they were tired. Jake sat back down on the flat rock. He looked at the crystals glowing around him, at the dragons waiting for his answer, at the tunnel that led back to the surface. He could leave. He could take the crystals and go. He could pay his debts and disappear and forget this place ever existed. But something held him there. Something he had not felt in a very long time. Purpose. Okay, Jake said. He put down his pick and leaned back against the rock. I'll stay. I'll stay. At least for a while. Let's see what happens. The largest dragon lowered its head until it rested on the ground near Jake's feet. The others relaxed their postures, settling into positions of rest. For the first time in 8 months, the dragons of Mineshaft 77 were not hunting. They were waiting. And they were no longer alone. 3 weeks passed in the darkness of Mineshaft 77. Jake had stopped counting days after the first week. Time moved differently underground, where there was no sun to mark morning or night. He slept when he was tired. He ate when he was hungry. And slowly, he learned to live with dragons. The largest one, the leader, Jake called Stone. The name fit. Stone was patient and solid and never rushed anything. The wounded dragon, The one Jake had hit with his pick, he named Shadow because it always stayed just at the edge of his light. The two others became Whisper and Echo because of the sounds they made when they communicated. They brought him food. Strange cave creatures that lived in the deeper tunnels. Things with too many legs and pale flesh. Jake cooked them over small fires and shared the meat with the dragons. They seemed to appreciate the gesture, even though they preferred their food raw at night. If there was such a thing as night in the mine, the dragons slept near Jake. They curled around him like massive armored cats, their bodies radiating warmth in the cold tunnels. Jake had never felt safer in his life, which was strange, considering he was surrounded by apex predators. Lisa contacted him every day. She had become his connection to the surface, his reminder that another world existed above the stone. She told him about the news spreading through the colony. The human who went into Mineshaft 77 and did not die. The human who lived with dragons. Director Paulos arrived yesterday, Lisa said during one of their calls. Her voice was worried. He's the head of the mining company. He's very unhappy that you haven't returned with the crystals. Jake leaned against Stone's side. The dragon's heartbeat was slow and steady. What does he want? He's talking about resuming operations. He thinks you've neutralized the dragon threat. He wants to send teams down to harvest the crystals. That's not going to happen. Jake, he has authority over this entire colony. He can do whatever he wants. Jake closed his eyes. He had known this moment would come. The crystals were too valuable. The company would never just abandon them. Sooner or later, someone would try to take them. The next day, a message came through on the mining frequency. A formal announcement from Director Paulos. Attention all personnel. Mineshaft 77 will be cleared for operations within 48 hours. Emergency protocols will be used to remove any biological obstacles. All personnel are ordered to stay clear of the mine entrance. Emergency protocols. Jake knew what that meant. Poison gas. The company would flood the tunnels and kill everything inside. The dragons. And Jake, if he did not leave. Jake. Lisa's voice was urgent. You need to come out now. They're serious about this. Jake looked at Stone. The dragon was watching him, its head tilted in that curious way. Beside it, Shadow and Whisper and Echo waited, trusting Jake to know what to do. He thought about the Corvani miners who had broken through to the dragon's home. They had destroyed an entire ecosystem just to dig up crystals. The dragons had defended themselves, and now they were going to be killed for a dot. It was not right. It was not fair. I'm not leaving, Jake said. Jake, please. These creatures were here first, Lisa. We invaded their home. We killed their family members with our mining. And now we want to murder the survivors because they fought back. Jake stood up. I won't let that happen. He turned off his communicator. The next hours were busy. Jake explored every tunnel connected to the crystal chamber. He found the places where the mining operation had broken through to the dragon's original habitat. He saw the destruction the miners had caused, the collapsed caves, the dried pools where water once flowed. The dragons had lost everything. The 4 survivors were all that remained of a population that once numbered in the dozens. Jake returned to the crystal chamber and waited. The first team came down. The elevator 20 hours later. 6 Carvani soldiers, armed with gas masks and heavy weapons. They spread out through the upper tunnels, moving toward the crystal chamber. They never saw the dragons coming. Stone attacked from the darkness, hitting 2 soldiers at once and sending their weapons flying. Shadow came from behind, knocking another soldier into the wall. Whisper and Echo blocked the escape route. Jake stepped into the light, his hands raised. Stop. Everyone froze. The soldiers stared at Jake standing among the dragons, completely unharmed. Go back, Jake said. Tell Director Paulos that this mine is closed. Tell him these creatures are under my protection. Tell him that anyone who enters does so at their own risk." One of the soldiers, braver than the others, raised his weapon. Shadow growled, a sound that shook the tunnel walls. "You're outnumbered," the soldier said. Jake almost laughed. "No, you are." On his signal, the 4 dragons moved forward together. They did not attack, but their message was clear. This was their territory. They would defend it. The soldiers retreated. They ran back to the elevator and disappeared toward the surface. Jake knew it was not over. Director Palos would not give up so easily. He would send more soldiers, or use the gas, or find some other way to get the crystals. But Jake had a plan. He contacted Lisa. "I need you to do something for me." "Something important." "What?" "Contact the Galactic Mining Authority. Tell them I'm filing a formal territorial claim on behalf of the Varth species of Nethvora. This mine is their ancestral home. Under interstellar law, they have rights." Lisa was silent for a moment. "That's never been done before. A human representing an alien species in a legal claim. First time for everything. They'll need a legal guardian. Someone to speak for the Varth since they can't speak for themselves." Jake looked at Stone. The dragon looked back, steady and trusting. "I'll be their guardian," Jake said. "Put my name on the forms. Jake Morrison, legal representative of the Varth species." It took 3 days for the authority to respond. 3 days during which Director Palos sent 2 more teams into the mine. 3 days during which Jake and the dragons turned them back every time. Disabling weapons and scaring soldiers, but never killing anyone. When the response came, it was delivered by Commander Sam Ellis, a human military liaison who arrived in a warship that made Director Palos very nervous. "The territorial claim has been accepted," Alice told Jake through the communicator. "Pending investigation, Mine Shaft 77 is now protected territory. No mining operations are allowed until the rights of the native species have been evaluated." Director Palos screamed at everyone who would listen. He threatened lawsuits and political consequences and a dozen other things that no one cared about. But it was done. The mine was protected. The dragons were safe. Jake sat in the crystal chamber that night, surrounded by his strange new family. Stone rested its head near his feet. Shadow had finally stopped staying in the shadows and lay directly beside him. Whisper and Echo groomed each other nearby, making soft sounds of contentment. "We did it," Jake said quietly. "You're safe now." Stone made a rumbling sound that Jake had learned to recognize. It was the dragon's way of saying thank you. Jake smiled and closed his eyes. For the first time in years, he felt like he had done something that mattered. He was home. 5 years had passed since Jake Morrison walked into Mine Shaft 77 looking for crystals. He had found something far more valuable instead. The tunnels looked different now. Small lights lined the pathways, powered by a generator that Lisa had brought down years ago. The crystal chamber had become a home, with a small living area built against one wall. Maps and research documents covered every surface. The sound of dragon calls echoed through the stone, but they were not hunting sounds anymore. They were the sounds of family. Jake woke to the familiar weight of Stone's head resting near his sleeping mat. The great dragon was old now. Its scales faded to a pale gray instead of the deep black they once were. But its eyes, though blind, still turned toward Jake every morning with recognition and trust. "Good morning, old friend," Jake said. Stone rumbled in response. Jake walked through the tunnels, checking on the others. Shadow had become a mother 3 years ago, and her 2 young dragons followed Jake like excited puppies. They had never known a world where humans were prey. To them, Jake was simply part of the family. Whisper and Echo had produced offspring too. The mine that once held only 4 Vorth now held 12. A small population, but growing. Surviving. Lisa waited at the research station near the main entrance. She had moved to the mine permanently 2 years ago, setting up equipment to study the dragons and their behavior. Her work had made her famous in xenobiology circles. Papers about the Varth filled academic journals across the galaxy. "We have visitors today," Lisa said. "A group from the Galactic Science Council. They want to observe the dragons." "How many?" "6 scientists. And they brought a guest." Lisa smiled. "A young Corvani miner who specifically asked to meet you." The visitors arrived an hour later. The scientists were a mix of species, all wearing research uniforms and carrying recording equipment. They looked nervous as they descended into the tunnels. Stories about the dragons had spread far. The young Corvani walked at the back of the group. He was small for his species, with bright green scales and curious eyes. He stared at everything around him with wonder. Jake led them to the crystal chamber. Shadow's young dragons appeared from a side tunnel, and 2 of the scientists nearly fell over in surprise. The young dragons made chirping sounds and bounced around the visitors, sniffing at their equipment. "They will not hurt you," Jake said. "They're curious, that's all." Stone entered the chamber slowly, its massive body moving with the careful steps of age. The scientists stepped back, but the young Corvani moved forward. "You're Stone," the young miner said. "I've read about you. You're the leader." Stone lowered its head until it was level with the Corvani's face. The young miner did not run. He stood his ground, trembling slightly but not afraid. "Brave," Jake said. "What's your name?" "Kathos." The young Corvani turned to Jake. "My grandfather was Telos. He was the one who survived the first attack years ago. He told me stories about that night until he died. But he also told me about you, the human who tamed the dragons." Jake shook his head. "I didn't tame them. I just learned to live with them." "Why?" Kathos asked. "You could have taken the crystals and left. You could have been rich. Why did you stay?" Jake looked around the chamber. At the glowing crystals. At the dragons watching from the shadows. At Lisa documenting everything with quiet dedication. At the young Corvani standing before him with honest curiosity. "Come with me," Jake said. He led Kathos deeper into the tunnels, past the crystal chamber, into the older caves where the dragons had lived before the mining began. Stone followed behind them, its footsteps slow but steady. They reached a large cavern filled with old bones. Dragon bones from generations past. Jake had found this place during his first year in the mine. It was a burial ground, a sacred space where the Varth laid their dead to rest. Before the mining started, Jake said, there were hundreds of dragons living in these caves. They had families. They had traditions. They had a whole world down here in the darkness. Kathos looked at the bones. "We killed them, not on purpose. But yes, the mining destroyed their home and killed most of their population. The 4 dragons I found were all that remained. They were defending the last piece of their world. And you protected them." Jake nodded. "I came here to take something. To fill a hole in my life with money and crystals and things that didn't matter. But these creatures showed me something about myself." He reached out and touched Stone's head. The dragon leaned into his hand. "They showed me that I needed a home more than I needed wealth. They gave me that. The least I could do was give them the same." Kathos was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "I want to help. I want to make up for what my people did. You're not responsible for the past, but you can help shape the future." Jake smiled. Lisa could use an assistant. Someone to help with the research. Someone to help us prove that the Varth deserve to live. The young Corvani's eyes brightened. "I would like that very much." They walked back to the crystal chamber together. The scientists had relaxed now, taking measurements and observing the dragons with professional interest. Shadow's young ones had fallen asleep in a pile near one of the researchers, who looked terrified and honored at the same time. Jake watched it all from the edge of the chamber. Stone settled beside him, lowering its old body to the ground with a tired sigh. "You know," Jake said quietly, "when I first came down here, I thought this would be my grave. I thought the darkness would swallow me like it swallowed everyone else." Stone made a soft sound, but it didn't. "Instead, I found you. I found a purpose. I found a family." Jake leaned against the dragon's warm side. "I didn't stay because I couldn't leave. I stayed because I finally found something worth staying for." Stone's head turned toward him. Even without eyes, Jake could feel the dragon looking at him, understanding him, loving him in whatever way dragons loved. The young Varith woke up and began playing again, chasing each other through the crystals. Lisa laughed at something one of the scientists said. Kathos was already asking questions, eager to learn. Life filled the tunnels that had once known only death and fear. Jake closed his eyes and listened to the sounds of his family. The rumble of stone breathing, the chirps of the young dragons, the voices of visitors who came not to take, but to understand. "Thank you," Jake whispered, "for everything." Stone exhaled slowly, its breath warm against Jake's shoulder. In the language of dragons, in the only way it knew how, the old creature answered. "Stay," it said. Jake smiled. "Forever," he promised. And in the dark mine of Nethphora, the human who came for dragons found something rarer than any crystal. He found peace. He found purpose. He found home.